Right, Nick, let's talk about the Las Vegas Raiders. We've all been wondering, what is the Raiders' plans moving up into the draft? There's a lot of interesting options we've heard. Where are they going to trade up? Are they not going to trade up? Are they going to stay where they are? Who are they going to pick? But it seems there's something that's come out in the news lately that makes it seem the Raiders are trending towards one move in particular if things fall their way. Let's get into the article and then we can talk more about it on the other side. This is from Bleacher Report. It says Las Vegas Raiders general manager Tom Telesco and head coach Antonio Pierce have plenty of leeway in their search for the team's next starting quarterback. Team owner Mark Davis has given his blessing for Telesco and Pierce to make a move, any move, so long as it makes sense. ESPN's Paul Gutierrez reported this. The Raiders hold the number 13 pick in the 2024 draft, but will need to trade up to snag any of the top quarterback prospects on April 25th. The Raiders have been heavily linked with LSU's Jaden Daniels, who's projected by Bleacher Report NFL scouting department as the number 3 pick. Sports Illustrated Albert Breer reported last month the Raiders have exploratory talks to move up into the top 3. This is very interesting, especially the aspect of Mark Davis has now formally given his blessing to them to make any move that they wanted. Nick, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this one. But Raiders fans, in the comment section below, do you think the Raiders have to go higher than number 2 to get a guy like Jaden Daniels? Let us know in the comment section below. There have been reports that Washington is linked to Jaden Daniels at number 2. Who do you think Washington is going to take at that number 2 pick? And do you think Jaden Daniels will be available at number 3? Let us know in the comment section below. But Nick, what are your thoughts on this latest news about the Raiders?
So it's interesting because normally this time of year, you every single franchise, they keep their strategies very close to the chest, right? They're not publicly declaring anything. Certainly no GM, certainly no coach, certainly no owner is going to come out and say, "Hey, we're all in. We've got the blessing. We've got the go ahead to try and make a big trade to move up in the draft to acquire our quarterback," right? Even teams where it's obvious that's what they're trying to do, at least like the Minnesota Vikings, even they have been totally silent. And I think the reason this has come out publicly, Mark Davis is saying this, is because I think the Raiders are over the next few days, and it may happen soon. It may happen the day of the draft. It could be a couple weeks, but sometime before the number 3 overall pick in the draft, I think it's going to be number 3. The Raiders will move up and make a trade, likely with the New England Patriots. There could also be a discussion with the Commanders. The only reason Mark Davis comes out and says this is to get ahead of any PR, to get ahead of any potential backlash or news that could come from a massive trade. And look, the Raiders would have to give up a lot. Most likely a first round pick this year, a first round pick next year, and probably both second round picks this year and next year as well. Maybe some extra assets as well to move up from their number 13 spot all the way up to number 3 or number 2. That's kind of the going rate for that kind of move. Now, the only reason you go public and say, "Hey, listen, I've given it my blessing. We're good to go ahead on that trade if it makes sense," is if you know as the owner that the trade is really close to being finalized, that a deal is imminent. I think that's what this is an indicator of, that the Raiders, who, like Albert Breer reported, were in exploratory talks earlier this month or back in March. I think those exploratory talks have evolved to the point where the Raiders have probably a deal in principle. I think what the Patriots could be the Commanders to move up and draft their quarterback. And it may not execute until the day of the draft, but I think the only reason Mark Davis comes out and is public with this is that the Raiders have essentially agreed in principle to trade up and find their franchise quarterback. Otherwise, there's no reason to come out and say this. So I think this is obviously the early indicators of an absolutely massive move for the Raiders finally getting their franchise quarterback.
Yeah, Nick, and I think I have an interesting thought on this potentially of why the Raiders are doing this and why they're formally announcing. And when you look at a move like this, it's a very big move for, a very big future of this franchise, and you don't want anything to go wrong. So one last step in the process is to maybe formally announce what you're going to do to see what happens with the other teams around you. Is anybody else trying to make a move? Do more reports come out that the Commanders are looking at Jaden Daniels? Are the Commanders looking at Drake May? Are the Commanders looking at JJ McCarthy more? What is going on around the Raiders and potentially that number 3 spot if they are to trade up to there so they can feel more comfortable about that move? Now, other teams might not do anything, but I think this is another thing that the Raiders could do to kind of urge other teams to make their moves. We all know the Vikings are looking to trade up as well. Do they start making talks? Do they somehow get back in that crazy notion people have heard? There's been rumors the Bears want to trade down from number 1, and it would take a lot to trade down from number 1. Does someone try to do something crazy like that? I think potentially what the Raiders are doing here is just trying to do that one last step in the process to see if anything else has happened, doing all the due diligence to try to move up in the top three because they want to get their guy. They don't want to just move up for anybody. I think they want to move up for the guy that they want, or there could be guys, but I think that this is a smart move by the Raiders to try to gauge what is going on with the other teams because there's a lot of teams looking for a quarterback in this draft.
I think that's a great point that you bring up because considering the timing of this, right? I think the Raiders, I agree with you. I think this is a big part of what they've done here is that they're trying to say, listen, if anybody else is going to outbid us and there are teams that can, the Vikings have more draft capital, a team like the Falcons or a team like the New York Giants, they pick earlier than the Las Vegas Raiders. So if any of those teams want to outbid the Raiders to move up to number 2 or number 3, now is the time to do it. And I love the fact that the Raiders are public with that because if it forces another team to bid up now, then that gives the Raiders time to course correct for their draft strategy, right? Because if that's, say, the Minnesota Vikings want to give up 3 first-round picks, they're 2 this year, 1 next year to move up to number 2 or number 3, then at that point, the Raiders are like, all right, you got us. And with that information, with time left before the draft, you can course correct and then go to your backup plan, whatever it may be. This gives the Raiders time to adjust to whatever happens by being so public about it, saying, hey, listen, right now, we're looking towards that trade. The owner's giving us a blessing. We probably got a deal. I say in principle, discussions are definitely ongoing. Now's the time to go public and say, hey, other teams, if you can outbid us, if you want to outbid us, time to put in your bids. Otherwise, we're going to be the one to close this deal. I think this is a really smart strategy by the Raiders across the board. And I think it's an exciting time to be a Raiders fan for all you Raiders fans out there, because I think when the dust all settles, the Raiders will have their new franchise quarterback. And I honestly think it will end up being Jayden Daniels.